right into the presentation. And I'm Lauren Kelley. If we haven't met before, thanks for being here today and joining me. And if you have been joining me throughout this Cataloging Month series, welcome back and thanks for joining again. Today we will be going over some cataloging practices for non-traditional materials, and we'll get into what exactly is meant by that. So overall, we're seeing a growing trend of libraries of things. This refers to useful but non-traditional objects that libraries add to their circulating collections, including telescopes, mobile hotspots, guitars, and more. That quotation is from a really great resource, and it is all about non-traditional materials, and it is linked in the syllabus, which is on Niche Academy, as this recording will be also added later. Some other examples of items in libraries of things include board games, snowshoes, bicycles, DVD players, cake pans, touring this summer, different libraries in Vermont with the consultants from the Vermont Department of Libraries has been really interesting to see what libraries of things libraries have. You guys have a lot, spanning a whole plethora of stuff. So the language for what we're talking about today, in different documents, you'll see these non-traditional materials be referred to as three-dimensional forms, objects, things, non-traditional materials, items, kits, 3D items, realia, tactile three-dimensional forms, three-dimensional artifacts, or a replica of an artifact, or a naturally occurring object. So there's a lot of language that all just kind of means the same thing when it comes to libraries of things and non-traditional materials. But I wanted to point out what we're not talking about today necessarily are items like DVDs, audiobooks, magazines, periodicals, music CDs. These are not necessarily considered non-traditional items, even though they're non-book items. So I just wanted to make that clear that we are talking more about the snowshoe, board game, camera, microphones, that kind of thing today. And if I cut out at any moment, please just let me know and I can restate something. Looks like technology is going to be an issue today. All right, so when we're talking about these things appearing in our collections, we want to think about, from the cataloging side, is this going to be considered a kit record or a singular item? That question is really going to put us on the path for cataloging the item in a specific way, and what parameters may already be set up if we use a template for a MARC record. We also want to think about where will they live. So what's the physical aspect of the cataloging that needs to be taken into consideration? Is there a specific shelf? And then how do patrons interact with this thing? Is there a binder that shows its picture? And we'll get into more of that kind of at the end of the presentation. And then loan parameters in your integrated library system and the policy also comes into play when it comes to thinking about the cataloging, because if you have a material type like a kit record set to a specific loan parameter, you may not want to put that same item under that category of item or that location, that item type. So that's going to be a consideration as well when it comes to adding these things into our catalogs. So when it comes to the MARC record, the current set of rules that are most prominent in our catalogs today, RDA, they were created for print or electronic textual materials. So when it comes to making records for these items, there's a little bit of a not going to say bending the rules, but there's different judgment calls when it comes to applying these rules to items that are not print. The best practices for cataloging objects using RDA and Mark 21 from the Online Audiovisual Catalogers Incorporation is that whole document is on the syllabus, which is a really, really helpful document to read through. But it talks about how you want to provide only the elements that are applicable and readily ascertainable, much like you would with a physical book, and record information from the resource in the element or elements it's most logically corresponds to. So you have to make those decisions about, okay, what exactly, you know, I might not have a publisher per se, but I could have a distributor, and I could put that information into the 264 field. So it's you kind of have to think almost laterally to figure out which field maybe corresponds to the information that you have that is worth recording on a record of this nature. There's also, of course, considerations for if you have a shared catalog, who else is going to see these materials. I think that it's really interesting that there are so many different materials at libraries of things in different libraries, but there are also some that are very similar. A lot of places do have bicycles and snowshoes, board games and cake pans. I've seen those at multiple libraries. So I wonder if those catalogers there have reached out to other libraries to talk about how they've cataloged that, if there's any resource sharing going on. So it's important to communicate with other catalogers. It makes more work easier. And as always, catalogers use brackets to indicate data added at the cataloger's discretion. It may not be directly from the item, but there's good authority to include that information onto the record. And this will come up when we talk about these kinds of records as well. And there are differences in the templates and interfaces for our integrated library systems. Our ILS, our catalogs look different and may present fields differently, both from the cataloging side and from the OPAC, the user side as well. So that's important to remember when we're talking about MARC records, and especially when we're talking about this kind of resource sharing piece or having just sharing records, really. So I wanted to say that when it comes to copy cataloging, there are several different ways that copy cataloging can come in handy when it comes to libraries of things and non-traditional materials. You can use Clover, which is the statewide and ILL system. The Z3950 search, which is in most ILS systems, integrated in already. And then the Library of Congress catalog can also be searched. And there's two approaches here with those different databases. You can look for your library's item, or you can look for a similar item. If you're looking for your library's item, you can download and import that record into your catalog and then adjust the appropriate fields. Or if you're looking for a similar item, you can, two options here as well, use it as an example, a reference record, while you make your own, or you can download it and then adjust the appropriate fields and add items. So this is a way to get around original cataloging, which can be time consuming and depending on experience level, be a little bit bewildering. So there are options where you can either look for your item or look for a similar item to use as a reference or to change. And hopefully after today, you'll feel comfortable with, you know, knowing what the appropriate fields to adjust on a large sense is. Of course, as always, there are exceptions to the rule, and there are always peculiarities that come up with various items, which I'm always happy to answer questions if you have a specific item and need some help or just want some guidance or just, hey, what do you think about the right way to do this is? Just send me a message. I'd love to hear that. All right, so I'm going to be talking about this example from the Vermont Department of Libraries. Let's see here. There is a question already. Is LC catalog same as Cat Express? I don't think it's exactly the same because I think Cat Express actually has, like, it has global reach, where the Library of Congress just has, I think, national reach. So they're not the same. A lot of crossover is apparent, though. They're both great resources, but I think I've seen more like non-English materials in Cat Express because the Library of Congress is, specifically United States. So they're not the same. Yeah, one is owned by OCLC and one is owned by Library of Congress. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so the example that we'll be looking at today are these Rode microphones that the Department of Libraries got and distributed this past summer with help from Big Heavy World and the Fletcher Free Library. And so this is a record that I came up with in Verso. We're going to be looking at the Verso front side and back side. Debbie also puts in that WorldCat is another good source. Yes, that is true as well. And I hadn't known that you could download things from Clover, but anything that the state gets and distributes will be able to, I'll make a record for it in Verso, and then that can get distributed via Clover. There is a web tutorial that April Shaw put together on the Cataloging and Technical Services webpage on the VTLIB website that I encourage people to use. You will need your ILL credentials, but depending on your role at your library, I'm sure it's straightforward enough to find. Ask your head of ILL if you can either use their credentials or we can figure out a way that you can get access to that. But that is a way that you would be able to download this record per se. So here is the MARC view of that. Oh, Wendy says that they have Verso as a Z3950 target. That is fantastic. I love hearing that. That's much easier than having to log into Clover. So that's great. If your ILS allows you to toggle on your targets in your Z3950 search, if Verso appears, that would be great to use. Awesome. Okay, so we'll go into the MARC fields that appear here, and if anyone has questions, please jump in as we're going along. We're going to talk about the leader first. And if some of this sounds similar to what we talked about in our basic class or our advanced class, which happened earlier this month, apologies for repeating. If any of this is not in depth enough, you're welcome to go back to those recordings and share, all these resources out as need be. So the leader is a funky looking string of informational characters. It does not have any indicators or subfields, and it's positionally defined, which means that there are 24 spaces or characters that relate to specific aspects of a record. So this is about the MARC record itself. Collections of spaces can also mean one element. So you can have a set of 3 characters that mean one thing. English, for example, is language notated as ENG. So 3 characters can equal 1 element, or 1 space, 1 character can equal 1 element, depends. And the point of this field is basically for the computer to understand information about the record itself. Once again, we are machine readable cataloging record. That's what we're talking about. We're making it so that the computer can understand what this information about this item is. Here's the example in Verso. And Verso, and once again, this is going to depend on your ILS. It may, oh, someone just asked, will you be sharing your screen? Thanks. Can everyone see my screen right now? Because I can reshare. Let me reshare just to make sure that it is shared. Sorry about that. Okay, let me reshare the right one. There we go. Okay, let's get that over there. All right. So in Verso, we get this little leader up here at the top, and it doesn't allow you to interact with every space, which different ILS is going to handle this differently, and what it autofills will be different depending on your ILS as well. So there's different discrepancies. But in position 6, we can point out that this is a 3-dimensional artifact or naturally occurring object. There are other options as well that relate to, non-text materials. In the 7 position, we can, usually you would have this for a book as well, but, stating that this is an item. Typically, your encoding level, you are leaving that blank, which is indicating full level, which is really like you're fully completing this record, and you have the item in hand. And then the descriptive cataloging form, typically, I mean, I don't think there's an RDA specific one, but for most hybrid records, you'll see this AACR2. This is talking about the rules that you're following. Sometimes you'll see it just left blank because you're doing an RDA record. Once again, this field is one of those tricky ones that it's going to differ a little bit, what you can put in or what is filled in automatically depending on your ILS. So it'll look a little different depending on what you're using. The next field that I wanted to point out is last seen. This can help you identify when the record was made. And there's specific format and layout for that. There are no indicators. It is repeatable. And here we have year, month, date, and also hour, minute, second, and there is decimal seconds. There's a question in the chat that asks, is it fine to have games and puzzles as mixed material? Yeah, I think your options in that field are limited, and mixed material, I think, typically suits best a variety of options. We might want to go into the Mark 21 handbook and look at those options. That might be a good idea. I'm going to write that down. So we can return to that and look at those fields to see what all the different options are. Laura asks, is this last seen for the record or the item itself? This is last seen for the record. These kind of first fields are record specific, not necessarily item specific, to keep track of creation of the MARC record itself. Physical description does have to do with the item. There are no indicators or subfields. Again, it is repeatable. It's another one of those fields that are positionally defined by the category of material, and it's a tree structure. So depending on what physical descriptor you are applying to the record about the item, it will change length. The length of the field is going to change depending on what specific letter, content, character you're inputting into this field. So down here, I've marked in red, O is typical for a kit. Z is also typical because some of our materials, like a cake pan, may be an unspecified physical description. RDA was not meant for a cake pan, but it does have this option to put unspecified. And once again, the input of that is going to look different depending on your ILS. This is in Verso up here. So current contents, it says what the field is looking like, and it gives you 2 spaces, category of material. This is a kit, and it's an unspecified material. For the fixed length data elements, this is another kind of squirrely looking field, which has no indicators or subfield codes. It is non-repeatable. It is positionally defined by the type of material, once again. So it has that tree structure. It'll change depending on what you're doing. Here are some the examples of the major structures that you can get. And when it comes to these non-traditional materials, typically mixed material is going to show up, especially if you're using a kit, because that might include some kind of booklet, some kind of instruction, as well as the object itself. So that would be great for mixed. There is another question. What is tactile material in 007? Tactile material. Let's see here. F, tactile material. Let's go to the MARC handbook for that specific question, because I want to get the language right. That probably, I'm going to stop sharing so that I can pull up. Let's see here. So I typically, okay, so I have my MARC 21 handbook bookmarked. And control fields, physical description, fixed field, right? That's what we're after. Yeah, tactile material. Oh, does this not give the definitions? So we want tactile material. Okay, when code F appears, it contains special coded information about the physical aspects of material that is intended to read by touch. So, Braille is probably the most common thing that we would think about when it comes to things read by touch. So that's what this is talking about, not necessarily something that you interact with. You know, it's not an object, it's something with the intention to be read by touch. So that's what that means specifically. I knew it wasn't pertaining to an object, it's talking about Braille or things of that nature. Oh, no. Let me get back onto the proper slide. Okay. Debbie answered Laura's question again, that 005 is the last edit of the MARC record. Yep, so it's about the MARC record. Okay, I think I'm caught up on questions. Please keep them coming. All right, so when it comes to objects and materials that we buy that are not books for our collections in the library, some of them come with an ISSN, which is the International Standard Serial Number. Many things have barcodes. For example, the microphones that the state got, we can include its serial number here. That might be helpful, if you're looking for a similar item, if you want to look at the exact page for that item. It's information that you can include. Much like an ISBN would be included, there is a spot for the serial number. We've gone over the 040 in past sessions this month, but it is about who is doing the cataloging on this particular record. So your institution or your consortium code, if you are creating a record from scratch, you do include your code in A and C. B, because we're cataloging in English, you're going to say ENG. This is non-repeatable. D, on the other hand, is repeatable, and this is where you put your code once again. Or if you're editing a record, if you've edited any part of the record, add your institution code in this subfield D on field 40. There's a spot to look it up, or if you're a part of consortium, reach out to your consortium head to figure out what proper code is. All right, another thing about the item itself is that there is, much like when you have a book, the spot for the author. The 100 can be used for a specific creator of the item, but you may not see that as applicable. In our example here, the creator of the object, road, is only captured in the subfield C of the 245, the title statement. That statement of responsibility is reflected in C. It does not have a 110 for the company road. It really is a cataloger's decision what to include in terms of ownership and authority based on the item and relevance. 245, the title statement. Your first indicator is going to point out if it's written on the material or if it's stated or made. And in a lot of cases, when it comes to non-traditional materials, they are stated or made, meaning that the cataloger is not able to read a specific title off of the object. In our case, this did come from the box, the NT-USB mini microphone, but that first indicator is indicating that this is stated or made by the cataloger. Of course, our second indicator is non-filing characters. So how many characters the computer needs to skip when indexing anything that follows the A subfield. If there's questions about that, I'm happy to get more into that, but this is something that we talk about in the intro class and the advanced class, I think, as well. So treating the title statement, really what would be most helpful for librarians to refer to the item and also people who may search for the item. 264, I had mentioned before that there is actually a spot for manufacturer. This indicator, I don't know why it's showing up in the first slot when it is in fact in the second indicator spot. I pulled up the record earlier. I don't know why it formats that way. It might be something wrong in Verso. I might need to bring that up to autographics. but this 3 should be in that second indicator position, notating that this is the manufacturer information about the item. I was able to identify that this item was manufactured in 2020 from Rode Microphones in Sydney, Australia. So that was information that I could include. Once again, to get, all the recordable data that is applicable and relevant, and your ability to find it may vary depending on what your item is. And I'll say in general, for the fields that we go over today, it really is a use at your best ability, because once again, RDA was not meant for microphones or cake pans. The 300s is going to be really important. Typically, A is for pagination, but you can use it to state quantities of the item, much like with a book that doesn't have pages, you can say 1 volume. Here we have 1 USB microphone. Our subfield B for illustrations, etc. This comes with an instruction sheet that is mostly pictorial. So it says instruction sheet, and then C, typically you would round up in centimeters. This does have a height to it. It is 15 centimeters. So that's included on the record as well. And then when it comes to our RDA types, content, media, and carrier types, there are things that you'll kind of see across the board. Marie asks, is that dimension of the box or the actual item? I believe it's actually the actual item. Yeah, but they did come in cases, so that's a good question. Yeah, you would probably want to measure the container so that you know shelf space, typically. Thanks for that question. Typically with these non-traditional items, you're gonna see it's a 3-dimensional form. The media that you interact with is other. The carrier is unspecified because there's not a specific RDA form for that carrier. In the 500s, there's a lot of flexibility with what you can add for general notes, for what you can add for contents, and what you can add as a summary. 505 is especially helpful if you do have a kit that does have multiple elements to it. In order to make sure everything's there, it's easy to spell those things out in the record so that whoever is checking it in has a good reference. So here in our example, we have a 505 present with, there's a handout, there's the microphone, there's a cable, and an adapter. 520 speaks to a summary, what the item is, a little bit of how it works, and then there's more information at the assigning source where this block of text came from. So that'll be really helpful for the contents. There is some question about how relevant the 650 fields are and your subject access fields. If you have a map of a local area, you could add a 651 field. That way it's tied to those materials. But it's really about the relevance of that information. For here with the microphone, there is a Library of Congress subject heading microphone, equipment and supplies, podcasting equipment and supplies, sound recording and reproducing equipment and supplies, sound equipment and supplies. So that worked really well, really applicable, accurate to what the item is. We talked a little bit last week about the 690, 699 being reserved for local subject use and local definition. But of course, you have to remember that having proper documentation, if you have a shared catalog, is super important for that. And if you have exchange partners, so basically any libraries that might interact with that same kind of material, we have to think about, does this belong on the record level or the item level? So always just a word of caution with those fields in particular. When it comes to physical processing, there's a lot of different ways to go about doing the same thing. But in general, if you can find some sort of container, like a clear backpack that is seeable or see-through, that can be very helpful to the librarians at the front desk who are checking items out and in, making sure that everything is there. You want things to be contained, streamlined, non-losable, and for that, a packing list is always really helpful, and making sure that these things are reusable and easily replaced, as well as being cost effective, are all considerations. Put a picture of a laminator here because if you can laminate any kind of material that comes with the item or the kit, it is going to be much more usable and reusable, and you won't have to replace it as often. When it comes to storage and display, I know that that's a really tricky aspect to having library of things, especially in some of our smaller libraries. It can be a question of, do we have the shelf space for this? Is it front facing? Is it behind the desk somewhere? Is it in a back closet? Is it in a separate tool shed? Also, I've seen people use display cases. Like I said, back storage. There is a really great idea. Over here on the right, there's a picture where there's a binder. The binder has either there's a binder for an item, and that is patron facing. They can interact and make a decision about whether they want to get it and bring it up to the desk. Or there's a binder of all the library of things, and then storage is elsewhere so that patrons can get a good understanding of what's on offer, because as we know, if we don't market these things, they will not get used. And then I wanted to make a special note of tagging things. So in this picture here, you can see that all of these tags are nicely attached, very clear about one barcode per that item. That's generally the best way to do it. In my experience, is having one barcode for one item, but having a good clear tag attached to the item is really helpful. I'll go back one slide. These little kind of like almost like badge cases or like card holders can be really helpful for that aspect. And I loved this example is from Illinois. They have these little tags that have the item and the barcode, and that's what gets brought up to the front desk and people can browse. So it's a really nice way of saving space. Okay, so I would love to hear some examples from you. What's at your library? What has been hard to deal with? What has been really successful? How have you cataloged your items? And what would you like to get in the future for your library? Any of those questions are on the table. I'd love to hear from people about non-traditional materials. You can keep it cataloging specific or not. The floor is open and I can stop sharing. Debbie.
Sorry, I'm at someone else's desk. I couldn't find the unmute. I just want to say in terms of Marie's question about the dimensions,
Yeah.
the dimensions in some field C should be the item itself. And if it's also in a case, you can add a E subfield that says, you know, in case or in plastic case or whatever, and then put the dimensions of the case.
Awesome. Subfield E.
typically when you're adding a subfield E in the 300, after the dimensions of in subfield C, you would have a space and a plus sign, and then the subfield E.
Great. Let's see, someone else had a question. Oh, Victoria has put in the chat, jigsaw puzzles have an ISBN, but I haven't been able to find them in CAD Express. Where else can I look? Yeah, if you can't find it in CAD Express, I think CAD Express has one of the largest reaches. But I think this might be an example where you may not be able to find the specific item, but I'm sure you can find similar items. I would go to Library of Congress, see what they have, see if they have that ISBN. Maybe not though. I don't know if they would have puzzles. But I would think that local libraries around us have jigsaw puzzles. So I would search for jigsaw puzzles, find something very similar, and then take that record and change fields. That's what I would do in that case. All right, I'm seeing hands going up. I think I saw Bree first. Oh, it went down.
Oh,
Gail?
it's still me.
Okay.
Yeah, I I often find, especially since, it's just me here, that
Yep.
cataloging is one of the main barriers to adding to the Library of Things. But I do want to make a shout out to both Lauren and Debbie, who are on the call, because they've helped me catalog stuff or sent me a record. So I think if you're worried about the cataloging part of it, there's enough resources, in the state that you can get help from your consortium or get help from your the state. But it can be really intimidating, I think,
Yeah.
to make an original record for a non-traditional item. And then also, like, the records that I sometimes find that other librarians have made, and then I ask for help. Like the record coming from you, Lauren, was like 10 times longer than the record, that was in Koha. And it's like,
Yep.
well, there's one already in there. I know Lawrence is better, but I don't have like the expertise or time, so I'm going to go with that. So I think that I guess maybe you could give us all a little bit more confidence in saying that, there's the letter of the law way to do it, and then there's the practical way to do it. And it shouldn't be, the cataloging shouldn't be the barrier.
Yeah, no, definitely. Always the point of cataloging is so that we can get the item to the people, always. But there are so many barriers in different ways with time constraint and then just knowing what you're looking at when it comes to a record. Part of, I'm going to put a plug in for the round table because this is exactly kind of what I want to foster more of is someone has a critter cam, someone else is getting a critter cam, being able to know that, okay, that's the tech services person there, or, someone who's filling that role, they can reach out to about kind of sharing that resource because there is a lot of overlap and it can be very daunting and time consuming. Yeah, well, thank you, Bree. And yes, please reach out to
Yeah, you just helped
cataloging
me do
consultant
table
here
and
for that.
chairs. So we have a table and we have two sets of card tables and chairs that we lend out. And that was my latest odd cataloging task.
Yep. Yeah. And yeah, it kind of tickles me like how odd things can be. Like, I mean, a table and chairs, that is really useful and probably not something that someone would need all of the time or want to store at their own house. So the library offering that is amazing. But can they get it without a record? Probably not, or at least not as easily if there was a record. So yeah, good example. And please always reach out. All right, Gail, you had your hand up.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for this. So,
Hello. Yeah.
you said that you created a record for the mini microphone. And so I'm wondering, I just went into Koha to see if I could to create it, a record using the Z3950, which
Yep.
would be Verso, which is what you use, correct? So what would when I'm in there though, I'm not finding any record. And so I'm
Yeah.
wondering, how do I search that? And why isn't there a, like a library of, what do you call it? Not typical items in our drop down for what we're looking for in Koha. Debbie, maybe you could answer that. But
Oh,
you know what I'm saying?
like
So
an
how do
item
I search for
location
that?
specifically for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to that Z39 search, you should get before you really finalize the search, you should get an option to toggle different like library targets on. And with Verso or Koha, I think you have to go into the settings to see what targets show up. So that's an extra layer of knowing your ILS in order to add those as targets.
Okay.
But Marie said that, no, Wendy had said that her ILS was able to work in Verso to pull things from Verso with that Z39 search. So I'm wondering, Wendy put her hand up. I'm wondering if that was something she had to add to those targets in order for that to be used, because that would be very helpful if that was kind of across the board.
It was something that I had to add to the targets, and that's an administrative job to do that. So, and I'm in Catamount, so everyone who's in Vocal needs to get onto their administrators to get that added to their Z3950 targets.
You were a little fuzzy, Wendy, but I did get the message that that was something that you added into the ILS in order to do that. So yeah, everyone should. That would be really helpful, just so that they're connected to the Vermont library system in general. Yeah, and the state materials.
Well, I guess that's the next question.
Yeah. How does my ILS work?
Yeah.
is a lot of what it comes down to. Which, sorry, Gail, repeat what ILS you use.
Koha.
It is Koha. Okay. And are you part of Catamount
No.
or Vocal, or are
Vocal.
you your own?
Vocal.
You're in Vocal? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Sorry,
don't
yes.
know. No, that's okay. Yeah, I don't know if Debbie might know how to make sure that that target shows up, but that would be something to reach out to the Vocal team about, making sure that you understand how that works.
I
Yes,
just
thank
put in
you.
the chat, Clover is a Z39.50 target site for Vocal.
Awesome. Okay. So it should be there then.
And
All right.
Gail, was it you asking about a drop-down menu for like non-traditional things?
Yes, I don't see that in mine.
In it, non-traditional items is a DOL reporting category in your item screen, but different people use different item types for their non-traditional items. So equipment, AV,
Right. Okay.
attraction passes is, so there's not just one blanket non-traditional items or library of things item type in VOCA.
Gotcha. I see that now. Thank you.
See that Wendy put her hand up again?
Just so that in Catamount, we do have a library of things item type, as well as the equipment and everything else. Just helps for the things that will not come in under those categories, then people can put their snowshoes under library of things, and it just makes it easier for doing the accounting at the end of the month.
Wendy, your microphone is very, very feedbacky. I don't know why it exactly is like that, but I did hear you say that you do have, your consortium does have that as an option for that drop down. Laura has put in the chat a really interesting point that I want to reiterate. Gail, did you have more to ask before I move on?
No, I'm sorry. I'll mute myself. Thank
No,
you.
all good. Thank you. So Laura says, I'm a trustee of the Cornwall Public Library. Our town recreation committee purchased and donated several invasive plant removal tools for circulation in the library. After this class, I will go back and finesse the cataloging I did of them earlier this year. I want to stop right there because a really important facet of what we do is that we always have the ability to go back and edit, make things better, apply different knowledge that we've acquired. And I think that's really important, is that you do not have to get it perfect the first time. You do not have to get it absolutely right the first time. You know, our catalogs are alive and not set in stone or static. So kudos to that approach, period. My question is for other libraries. If you have large tools, do you also have some sort of hold harmless or warning that the patron has to sign before lending them? That's a good question about policy. Policy and like liability waivers. If anyone wants to jump in, feel free to. This is also something maybe not necessarily for the cataloging roundtable, but it could be, kind of bleeds in a little bit as well to that. If not, that might be a good question for the listserv. I think I maybe saw something about waivers. Jill, you have your hand raised.
Yes. So interesting about this, because I was speaking with one of my best friend that works at a library in the state, and we were having a conversation. So probably a month ago, we received a packet of information, and I think the acronym is CLIC, but it's the Vermont Law School.
Yeah.
And a service that they offer, and they're trying to get pamphlets out. It's amazing. So I contacted them and asked them this question. So I can't reiterate what they said, but it's a wealth, because I don't remember and I don't have it in front of me, a wealth of information as to why you don't really want to call it a waiver, but
Okay.
maybe a patron agreement.
Yeah.
Because the waiver is not going to hold up in court for anything. But anyway, I would urge everybody and anybody to look that up and to use that service. I mean, you can offer it to your patrons, and if they're having a dispute with their neighbor because the neighbor's branches are hitting them in the face in their property when they mow their lawn, I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah, that's
So,
CLIC.
I think the acronym was CLIC, and they're ready and waiting. And boy, the person that helped me, she answered part of the question. It's like, I'm sorry, I can't do it all right now, but I will get back to you tomorrow with the second part of your question. And sends very professional, part of the state statutes where it might be found, examples from other libraries on this issue, from Vermont libraries, from out of state libraries. So anyway, there you go. That's my little blurb.
That's great. Yeah, thank you, Jill.
Advertisement, I guess.
Yeah, that's all
Free
good. Yep.
service.
Yeah, we love resource sharing. That's great.
Amazing. Just amazing.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to move on to Julie's question. We have a telescope which takes up a lot of space and comes with so much paperwork. We keep the telescope, weirdly enough, with the new fiction because it's so big. When they won't when they want to check it out, we give them the paperwork in a folder at the circulation desk. We also have to verbally tell them not to look at the sun with it. All right. Well, that may be an example where using click might be good as well. Marie brings up, I have a new item that I need to catalog, a critter getter, a motion detective device that emits a loud noise to keep bears and other critters away. Oh, I was thinking of using the existing record for a wood moisture meter, but I always want to make sure I am changing the right fields, especially those early 000s ones. Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, I wonder if the critter getter has an ISSN or an ISBN of some sort that you could either compare locally or nationally or in WorldCat or Cat Express. That would be all good places to look. You could also always go the route of using the existing record that you have in your system, making a copy of it and changing fields. If you do go that route and are unsure about anything, I'm happy to take questions. Janet says, the park pass records in our consortium vary quite a lot. In the leader position 6, it varies among text or object or picture. Is there a best practice for this particular item that all libraries in the state have? Short answer is no, but I would think that within the consortium, there would be a best practice. So that's when you do want to consult with the consortium in terms of what the best practice is. Yeah. Yeah, statewide, I don't think there is any guidance. Although that would also be a good thing for the roundtable, especially since that's a resource that I think it's distributed through VTLIB. I think that's right. I'm approaching a year here. Yes, Debbie had put in the chat that Clover is a Z3950 target in Bhopal. Josh asks, can you do copy cataloging like with books? If you have a ukulele or a teddy bear shaped cake pan, for example, yes, I need to catalog these things. Can you add just them to other records, or do they have to match exactly the brand name, etc.? That is a good question in terms of, do you have to match it exactly? I mean, in theory and intent, yes, we always want one record, one item. Is there probably a generic cake pan record out there? Yes. Do you always have the proper amount of time to change every field that might, be then applicable to that specific cake pan? Maybe not. It's up to you, and it's also up to, thinking about how many other libraries might then have to interact with that, maybe not as specifically cataloged item. So there's a little bit to weigh with that. But I would think, yeah, I mean, you kind of have to make that decision about how exact you want to be. But I think with non-traditional items, you definitely could have a generic cake pan record. And then if you have multiple cake pans, you could always put them on the item level, like your multiple ones, and have a note on that item, like this is the cat-shaped one, this is the teddy bear-shaped one. But it depends on who else has to interact with that record. See, Debbie has put her hand up.
For Vilco best practices, if someone else has a MARC record in there, you can't change the MARC record. So you have to decide if what you have matches closely enough. If my ukulele is, you know, I don't even know, a Yamaha or whatever, I don't even know who makes makes these things, but
Yeah.
and yours is not, and you're billing your patron as if your ukulele is a Yamaha ukulele when they break it or lose it, you know, that's on you. You know, if someone else has something attached to a record, don't change what they have. If
Yeah.
you have a close enough match that you're willing to use it, and you can use your item record to put in any other specifics for your library, go ahead and attach to that. Certainly the ideal is to have fewer cataloging records. So as many things as can match, it's better. You won't have 20,000 records for cake pans.
Yeah.
But but it has to match closely enough that you can tell your patron, this is what it is, this is what it looks like, this is what you need to replace it with. And the other question about parks passes is, you know, if you want to use the same parks pass mark record, you know, as long as it's a generic record. Some libraries are adding a separate record so they can put in the notes fields and things, call the library at this number to reserve this pass, or whatever their library specific things are. So if it's a shared record, your parameters or whatever have to match what's already on there. So don't add to something that someone else has really customized for their library unless it's also true for yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Debbie. Karen put in the chat, excuse me, in library world, the 005 field is identified as the modification date. I use this to search my collections for new additions. I get a lot of my cataloging in LW, which I think is Library World, from main state libraries, and in the last couple of years, they've gotten inconsistent in adding this field when they create the original record. If it exists, Library World automatically changes to the date time I'm adding the record. I need to be careful when pulling the records to know if it needs to be added by me. I'm surprised it doesn't get created automatically. That it doesn't get created automatically on that main state side. Yeah, interesting. Different libraries, different ILS adds things differently as well, different cataloging protocol. You know, it's good that you get things from a specific resource like main state. But yeah, the consistency might differ state to state, which is why I want to push for a cataloging roundtable so we can all be on the same page. All right. Yeah, many thanks for the click reference. That is true. There's been talk about a lending tool library. Yep, but that comes. Debbie says that Koha updates the 5 date when you save the record. Yep. So different ILS. Patty has her hand up.
Hi, I have a question. It's more hypothetical, but I'm wondering if you recommend cataloging non-traditional items that wouldn't be checked out by patrons, but they could be used at the library. I'm thinking of like historical records, like handwritten letters or old maps, you know, from
Yeah.
ago.
The first thing that comes into my head with that question is for statistics wise, if it'd be easier to track use of those items for like an annual report or just internally, you could definitely catalog those things. And it's also, you know, time constraint dependent as well. But yeah, I mean, the more that's accurately reflected in your catalog, probably the better overall. And especially with items in-house, you may want to be tracking some kind of statistics around those. And having it in the catalog would be an easy way to do that.
Okay, yeah, we're a very small library, so I can't see there being a lot of use for those, but it's, wondering if it's a good way to just document that we have them.
Yeah.
And what they are in case other people are interested too.
See, yeah, that was my second thought about how, you know, I don't know if you're part of consortium or if you have shared records, but when you create a record, it then becomes potentially a record for someone else. So that may be a consideration too. If you have a rare item, there may not be many records for it. And so if you know, have the ability and time to create a good record for it, that might be helping out a library, you know, somewhere else.
Okay, because I was thinking of like some one-of-a-kind items, like a handwritten letter from somebody from, you know, during the Civil War or something.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Marie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that might also help when you do inventory to see if, unfortunately, any of it has walked off.
Yep, that's true. Yeah, especially for like in-house use where it's maybe not monitored closely all the time, knowing what you have or should have. All right, it's 11:07. I can go back into the presentation, although I don't think I have too much more. Thank you everyone for your questions and your examples. And I hope that more of this kind of talk will happen at the cataloging roundtable, which is going to meet for the first time on the last Tuesday of every month. So on the 28th, basically, let's share questions, concerns, cataloging conundrums. You can send me any ideas or topics to add to the agenda. I'm happy to get that put together, and then I'll send it out, and it will be on Microsoft Teams, 10 to 11:30. And the link for that is on the Vermont Department of Libraries website on the technical services and cataloging page. There's a learn more about cataloging page, and that will have the link. I'm also going to send that out probably day of on the listserv. So I hope that we can, you know, keep these conversations happening about how do you do this? How should we do this? You know, what's consortium specific, what's library specific, what's Vermont specific. There is another question from Karen that says, would a picture book and CD combo be cataloged as mixed materials in 008? Any other hints about approaching this? That is a good question. I think that is one of those materials that, yeah, Marie is saying what I was going to get at too. Those picture books / CDs are so frustrating. I think that consortiums might have a best practice for that specific material, but I have seen it vary quite a bit from library to library, whether those are referred to as kits or audiobooks or just regular books, and then it's notated that there's a CD. I mean, technically, yes, it is mixed materials, but I don't have a set way of answering that. Julie says they refer to them as kits, which probably has that mixed materials. So it really, it's kind of up to the cataloger and the consortium and what's agreed upon already. Yeah, different libraries do them differently. Debbie says usually these are considered kits, but some libraries do them differently. Yeah, it probably would be mixed materials in the 008, because that's truly what it is. Yeah, but there's, you know, no hard and fast consensus necessarily. Any input from Catamount people, Karen says. Debbie says Kit is a choice in the leader field. Yep. And many of those have downloadable records, Wendy says. So. All right, that's all I have for today. I'm happy to stick around for more questions. There is a survey. Everything will be up on Niche Academy this afternoon, this recording, the syllabus, the slides. But if there's any questions, any concerns, please reach out. Thanks everyone for joining today, and thanks for discussing and sharing your examples and your comments. Today was the last event in our cataloging month series, but we will be meeting for the roundtable, which I hope to see everyone come to continue the conversation. All right, I'm going to stop recording. Everyone, have a great day.